Hello lovely people, I'm Creton and welcome to my channel. In this video I want to show you some of the stitches that you can use specifically in Crazy Patchwork. So I've just got a plain piece of cloth because I thought it would be easier for you to see. So I'm going to start with the blanket stitch. Now in Crazy Patchwork the principle is really embellishing the seams and then going crazy afterwards with lace and trims and so on. So I'm going to draw myself a line just with this pen. Just slightly curvy, and I've got some needles already threaded. I'm just using pearl cotton. It's quite a fine pearl cotton, so I've got it doubled up, but it's just the brightest colours I had just to show you. So for blanket stitch, if you imagine that drawn line, which I hope you can see is the seam, you want the bars of your blanket stitch to lay on the seam. So I'm coming up on the line, try and keep my hands out of the way. I'm not in a hoop, by the way. In Crazy Patchwork you don't need really to be in a hoop because it's thick. So I've just layered myself up a bit of wadding just to give myself a sturdy surface and this bit of old sheet. So then you come away from the line and make a straight stitch back up to the line, making sure that your loop is trapped under your needle. Do you see that? Don't pull it too tight so it puckers, and so you get this little L shape. And then you just keep doing that, and then you can, as you go along, you can vary the length of your stitches. So I could take a longer one here. And then I could go back to the shorter one again. And you can do this in a regular manner, you know, sort of waving them up and down, or just random, whatever you like really. So I'll do a long one again. I seem to be alternating. And you just do that all the way along your seam. So that's the blanket stitch. When you come to the end, you can either just anchor that down just by going through the other side of that loop, or you can mimic your starting point here. So if you imagine you were meeting another seam in your Crazy Patchwork, and just take a little straight stitch along to finish it off on the back. So that's the blanket stitch. So the next one I'm going to do is the chain stitch. So on that I'm going to come up on my seam line and I'm going to turn it round, because a chain stitch you work from right to left. Now I'm right-handed. I highly recommend, if you're left-handed and you can't kind of flip in your brain when you watch a right-hander, go and watch Marion on Marion's World, because she's left-handed. And she's a much better embroiderer than I am as well. So yeah, go and watch Marion. I'll put a link down below to her channel in case you don't know it. So for chain stitch, here's my thread coming out. You want your thread to be to the left of you. And you go in just where you came out, or just slightly next to it, and take a forward stitch, which will be the length of your chain, so you can vary that how you like. And come up, make sure that the loop is trapped under your needle as you come up. Trying to keep my arm out of the way. Do you see, do you see? And again, don't pull it too tight, so you get this little chain. Then when you go back down, again, keep your thread to one side or the other. I'll put it towards me, hopefully then I can stay out of your way. You go back into the chain, don't jump over the chain, go back into the chain about where you came out. And go forward again and pull it through again, not too tight. So I could do it again. So at this point I'm staying on my line. I want my thread to be under my needle. It's handier if you lay it as you go along. And you could also then, if you wanted to, go wibbly wobbly, so I can come up off the line. I've come up on the top of the line. I might take two in that direction. Whoops. And then I might want to come back towards the line, so I'll just angle my needle back down towards the line, making sure I'm through the loop, like that. You see I'm kind of laying my thread on so that I end up coming up through that loop, like that. And you can, you know, wibble about. So when you come to the end of your chain, then you just go in slightly over the loop. So I'm coming up through the loop and I'm going to go down outside the loop with my needle just to anchor the end of the chain. So that's chain stitch. You can do fly stitch. So I'm going to come up in the same direction. I'm going to work right to left again. So fly stitch, you basically make a little V. So do you see I'm just about 1/8 of an inch that side of my drawn line. I'm going to come down 1/8 of an inch the other side and then angle my needle so that I come up on the line with my thread trapped under the needle. And there we go. You see, so you get this little V. Now to trap it down, you can either just couch it down with a teeny tiny stitch. I'll do it all the different ways to show you. So I'm just stitching over that loop. So you just get a V. I'll do another one. And then the next one, you could either do it, you know, further away, or you could do it sort of right up here somewhere, so they're nestled together. That's called stacked fly stitch. So I've come up again 1/8 of an inch that side, go down 1/8 of an inch this side, angle it forwards. That one's slightly bigger, but you know. And then instead of just couching it, you can just take a longer stitch there. Just a straight stitch. And then you get a different look. And just do another one. And this again as well, you don't have to do it in a straight line, you can angle it, you know, and make it wavy like the chain stitch. So you can just play about, and I would recommend making yourself a little cloth like this if you're not familiar with these stitches, and just experiment with them until you get the feel of them and, you know, how they look and what they can do. So that's the fly stitch. So the next stitch I want to show you is quite commonly used in, I'll draw another line, in crazy quilts, crazy patchwork, especially if you look at some of the antique ones. So this bit of purple, if I can find what needle it's in, there we go. This is just a single strand, but it's dark purple, so hopefully you'll be able to see. And that's the herringbone stitch. And the herringbone stitch you work from left to right if you're right-handed. And I'm going to come, and this is going to cross my line. So we're imagining this is the seam in our crazy patchwork. So I'm going to come up below the line, the seam, then keeping my thread on to my right, I'm going to take a tiny little back stitch, not a back stitch, but a stitch back in the direction I came from. It's actually a forward stitch, but backwards, like that. And then I'm going to still keeping my thread to my right, I come below the line, and I do the same thing there. And this is a lovely rhythmical stitch to do. And again, you can play with the spacing, the size, the length of the legs, how far apart they are. You're basically making crosses with a long leg and a short leg. And you can really, I love that stitch, you really can get into the rhythm of it. And a variation on herringbone stitch is the chevron stitch. So how you do that is you make the same initial stitch in the same way, but then you put a little cap on it. So what you do is you come back down the same side. Can you see? And I'm coming in about the same distance away from here as I came out. So I came out there, I'm going to come in there. And then you come up in that same point. And basically you just put a little cap on top of your cross. So I do the same thing on this side. So I make my first stitch. And then instead of jumping over for the other side, I come back in the same side, about the same distance away, and come up in that same hole. Do it again. So I make my first stitch, and then I jump across and come back up through that hole, and that's the chevron. Just do it once more just to, you know, finish it off. And then again, if you want to finish off there, you can just jump down next to where you are, or you could go up there and go down, you know, however you think, depending on where you are in your crazy patchwork, if that's how you're using it. So you see it's here they're open, here they're closed, it's just a different look, but basically the same stitch. So herringbone and chevron. Let's tick them off. The next one is going to be the, what should we do next? The stem stitch, and that's nice for making a solid line. So I'm going to wave about over this drawn line here. So you're again making that same backward movement, so stitching back the way you came. So you kind of, if you see where your thread's going to lay, you're going in and then you're coming back up about a third or halfway along the stitch that you're making, like that. And then you just do that all the way along whatever line you want to create. And you can weave about. I always find it handier to sort of lay my thread down to see where I'm coming out, so that they all stay snugged up against each other. If you weave too much, you'll start getting gaps. It just depends how much that bothers you. Apologies if you can hear Stella snoring. She's obviously not impressed with crazy patchwork stitching. And that's a stem stitch. That's quite a simple stitch, but it gives a very different look. Oh dear, something happening there. A very different look to just a back stitch. And then to finish off, you just take your straight stitch down. Stem stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to do a beautiful stitch, which I find, I think I just don't do enough of it. I need to do it more often, and that's the feather stitch. I'll do myself another line. Let's have that same purple. And that I work sort of towards me. So I want it to kind of meander over the line. So I'm going to start off on the right of the line and come up. And then you need to sort of come across and down as if you're making a V, and your thread needs to stay under your needle again. Like that. And don't pull it too tight or you want it more curvy, more of a U than a V. And then I'm going to do the same thing again, so I'm going to come across from where I came out, about the same distance, you know. I mean, whether your stitches are even or not is personal preference. An angle again. That way. And now I want to go back the other way. So I'm going to come across here in line with where I came out, and then angle. It's really awkward to do it so you can see. And then angle back the other direction. And again, I want to make sure that my thread is under the needle. Get your loop, Catherine. Like that. And then again, in the other direction, across. Whoops. And angle it to the right. So if you're going in to the left, you angle to the right, and if you're going in to the right, you angle to the left. And then pull it through. And you can do it evenly, you know, 2 that way and 2 that way. Or you can vary it. You can do 1 one way and 3 the other way. But it's a beautiful stitch, and it's beautiful to then embellish further. And you see there, technically you come down on the same line, but you can vary. You can come down slightly lower. Again, I highly recommend getting yourself a little piece of cloth like this and just playing with these stitches and seeing what they can do. So I'll go back the other way again and angle to the right. And again, whoopsie, loopy, behave yourself, thread. And again, super awkward. Normally my arm would be across it, but then you wouldn't be able to see. Maybe it would have been handier to set the camera up behind me, but anyway. And there we go. And that's the feather stitch. And again, when you come to the end of your line of stitching, you just want to stitch, go down again over the loop just to trap it down. There we go. And the last one I want to show you in terms of stitching along a line like this. No, I've got two more to show you. The next one I'm going to show you is the Creton stitch. So I'm going to come up below my line again. Now the Creton stitch, you make vertical stitches either side of the line. So when you're above the line, you want to come, again I've got my thread to the right, you want to make a little stitch down towards you, a tiny bite towards you like that. And then when you're below the line, you make a vertical stitch upwards like that. So above the line, a tiny stitch towards you. You may find it easier to work it vertically, you know, like this. You just have to sort of experiment. When I'm doing it, I tend to twist and turn. So below the line I come up, above the line I come down. And again, that's a lovely stitch when you get into the rhythm of it. Below the line I come up, above the line I come down. And when you get to the end of your line of stitching, you can either just finish your leg by going down like that, or just couch that there, whatever your piece of work demands and whatever you like the look of. So that's the Creton stitch. Again, with that you can vary the size and the spacing and so on. So I'll end off that, and then there's just one more that I always think of as I mentioned Marion earlier. I always think of this as a Marion stitch because Marion loves a whipped running stitch. So this is for you, Marion. Not that you need, not that you need me to tell you how to do it. I don't need a drawn line. I'll use this bit of green that's still in my needle. That's probably enough. So whipped running stitch, you just basically you do a running stitch to start with. And you want it to be reasonably evenly spaced, so the stitch and the space reasonably the same size, as good as you can do. So I'll just do a few of those. You know how to do running stitch, I'm sure. Let's do one more. And end that off. And whipping any kind of stitches, because you can whip nearly every stitch, is a great way to use thicker threads as well that may not fit or may not be nice to sew with, in your needle. I'm going to use this red because it's already threaded and ready to go. And in Crazy Patchwork, you can use any thread, any threads basically that are nice to stitch with. The more varied, the better. So to whip the running stitch, you come up through the first hole that you came out of with your running stitch, and then you can whip it either that way or that way, but I think it's best to be consistent. And it's handier if you pull your thread down into the eye of your needle to use the eye of your needle to do this. Now at no point do you go back through the cloth. I'm just going under that stitch from bottom to top, not pulling it too tightly, and then I'm going to go under the next stitch again in the same direction from bottom to top. That's the direction I've chosen, and I'm just going to do that all the way along. Oops, and not get trapped around my cloth. And it makes this lovely kind of wavy line punctuated by the little dots of red. One more. That's all there is to it. And then when you get to the end, you just go down through the same hole as your last stitch to finish it off. There you go, that's the whipped running stitch. Now while I've got this red in my needle, that is my list of sort of stitches that go along a line. There's a few little extra ones I wanted to show you. First of all, French knots. Now also what's nice to do once you've done this is to then go mad with this, you know, just like with this fly stitch, feather stitch. You could, for example, come up a lot on each of these little lines and do a French knot at the end. So I'm going to do a 3 wrap knot. So I've got my thread coming out where I want my knot to be. And I've got my needle and I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3 times round. And then I'm going to put my needle back in just next to the hole, a thread or two of the cloth next to where I came out. And then I'm going to tension this, not super tight, but snug. And then hold that with my thumb. If you pull it too tight, you won't get the eye of the needle through it. If you don't pull it tight enough, your knot will be loosey-goosey. And just pull it through, do you see? And then straight away you've got like a little rose. On this one, I'm going to show you a pistol stitch, which is a version of the French knot. And you do the same thing, you come up through the hole, you make your 3 wraps, or however many wraps you want, you can vary that. And then instead of going down through the same hole you came up, you could come down a little distance away. So you put your needle in, I'm about 1/8 of an inch away, maybe 3/16. And then with your tension then, you need to make sure that your knot's tensioned and that little extra stitch you're making is also a nice tension. And again, just hold it with your thumb and pull it down. So then you've got a little French knot on a stalk. Let's do one over here with a slightly longer stalk. So you come up, do your wraps, 1, 2, 3. Let's go down a bit further away. Get your tension, just gently hold it with your thumb and pull it down. And then you've got a little French knot on a stalk. You could also do little crosses on the ends. I'm going to start going mad now, which is not the purpose of this, but you know how to do a cross stitch. You go down in one direction, and then I sort of visualize a square on the cloth and then come up in the other corner of the square and then go down in the opposite corner of the square. Do you see what I mean? As if the cross is fitting within a square, little crosses. You can do a lazy daisy, which is related to the chain stitch. Let's do one on here since we seem to be going mad on this feather stitch. So I'm going to come up on the point of that feather there. And then we do the same as we did with the chain stitch. So we want a loop of thread, go back in the same hole or just next to it where you came out. Take a stitch forward and trap your loop. So far it looks like a chain stitch. But then instead of coming back down in your chain, you just jump over the loop that you've made just to trap it down. And that's a lazy daisy. And those you can do to make an actual flower if you radiate them around. Again, don't pull them too tight, you want them to stay roundy and not go, you know, sort of V-shaped. And then you can just radiate out from the middle with lazy daisy stitches and make an actual daisy. This is a red daisy, which is a bit strange, but you can do 5 or, you know. If you wanted to make sure you space them evenly, you could with a blue pen draw yourself some lines first, but I like them organic. You see there, I haven't quite got those too close together, but it doesn't matter because I can either sort that out now with this next one, or I'm going to put something in the middle anyway, I expect, so it'll get covered up. Trap the loop. go, a little daisy. So then you could either put a, excuse me, a French knot in the middle, or you could put a little bead or whatever, and you could give it a straight stitch stalk, and then you could do some bigger lazy daisies in green, maybe for leaves, you know, go mad. So that's a lazy daisy, the French knot and the pistol stitch. And you can, like I said, you can use straight stitches of varying lengths. So you could make little stalks here and then put some French knots, or you could make a stalk and put a lazy daisy. You could do little French knots or lazy daisies on your blanket stitch. That looks super cute. Just, you know, combine all of those. Now the last thing I want to show you is a kind of thing. I'll use this black. Is it long enough? There's a very kind of thing, you know, quite a common thing seen in antique crazy quilts. I'm just going to thread this bit black, and that's a spider's web, and that's traditionally made in the corner. You know, if you've got a patch, let's draw it. If you've got a patch with a corner like that, where three patches meet, you know, so you'd have a patch here and a patch here, and then you've got this shape here somehow, doesn't matter, something like that. You come up in the corner of your patch, and then you take a long thread all the way down, however long you want your spider's web to be, and then you come up somewhere around a little way. I mean, will all vary with the scale of what way you're working and, you know, how big you want. This is just the principle. Make another spoke, and then I'm going to come up, make sure I'm not in the same hole obviously, or I'll pull it out. And let's make a third, but let's go along the drawn line because it makes more sense with the spacing. And then you don't want those long loopy threads like that, because they'll get snagged, you know. So you want to couch over, and couching is just stitching over another thread to hold it against the cloth. There is a video in this series of stitches in the slow stitch playlist called Couching, where I do all kinds of couching, and that's something you can also use a lot in Crazy Patchwork if you want to have a look at that. So I've just made a tiny stitch over that web there, and then I'm going to come up again just next to it, and that's just to hold that down, and then I'm going to stitch over to my next spoke like that, and then I'm going to come up behind the spoke again, just next to it, and jump over, and that will couch it at the same time as making my you know, the bar of my spider's web. I should have done another spoke here really, shouldn't I? Let's pretend I did. So same thing again, just come up the other side of that long spoke and then jump across and go down. And then I've run out of thread. Can I manage another one? We'll see. Then you just jump up to the next place, and you see how I'm making these threads make that shape, you know how spiders' webs are? So I'll come over just the other side of that spoke, and I'll come up just behind it. Weep. And go in there. Come up just behind it and go in there. There we go. And I'll just do that. It doesn't matter, does it? Whoops, and I've pulled it super tight. There you go. So there you have a little spider's web, and that's really pretty as well if you've got a kind of silvery thread, or if you've got metallic threads or anything like that. And you could even then make do a little spider with a bead and you know, some straight stitches for legs and so on, if you're not arachnophobic, of course. So I hope that was helpful. Spoiler alert, if you're following along with the Monday slow stitch projects, this coming Monday, which is the 3rd of June, because I appreciate you might be watching this in the future, and Monday the 10th of June, so 2 subsequent Mondays, we will be doing Crazy Patchwork. So that's why I wanted to get this video up first, so that's a reference for all those people that are following along. And hopefully it's useful to other people as well that are interested in this kind of patchwork. So anyway, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them down below. And meanwhile, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye!